Hi, everyone. Welcome to the GoldFish Report. I'm your host, Louisa. Today is Friday, August 17th, 2018, and this is our weekly Country Roads with our friend Winston Trout. How are you today, Winston?
Well, doing fair at the middle, and like they say, a little bit groggy, but I think I'll get through it okay.
That's good. Well, and I'm not dead, so that's good because there's those entities out there who are certainly making my life very difficult. And one day I'm going to talk about it, but it isn't going to be today. So we're going to talk today first. Winston's going to talk today about Admiralty law and the history of it. And before we get to that, I just wanted to screen share what's going on with Q, because it seems like things are starting to change to another aspect of the plan. Okay, what Q is doing is highlighting this connection. This is a picture of Gloria Vanderbilt, and Anderson Cooper is her son, in case people didn't know that. Here's the photo. Can you see that, Winston?
Is that on the far left, or is it
It's well, here, what I'll do is I'll stop
scroll
sharing.
down a little
Yeah,
bit?
I'll re-screen share because sometimes when you move things around, they don't share
Yeah.
well. Okay, so this is this is Gloria Vanderbilt in her home, apparently reading to her sons. One of
Holy hell! Look at that montage in the back above her bed.
exactly. This
Can
is
you bring that up a little bit?
yeah. It's really. Let me see. Where's my keyboard?
That is
No.
interesting.
Well, it's very revealing. Let me see if I can bring this down. No, couldn't do it that way. Let me see. Oh,
Well, I mean, I don't want to
hold on a
make a
second.
big deal out
Well,
of
here,
it, but my
here,
God Almighty, look at that!
here she is. Yeah,
Got
reading
some
to her
kind of
sons.
demon over her bed.
Indeed, and of course, she has this necklace on, which Q was highlighting right here. This particular part of it, this pendant, was
Hmm.
basically like a god on here, and then on the bottom they have like these little charms that are basically indicate a like an offering, a sacrifice made to this god on the pendant. And so what you have here is Anderson Cooper and another brother. And above their bed, or someone's bed, is this horrific picture of a sacrifice, a human sacrifice going on.
Great day in the morning.
Okay, so these are the people, this is who's running our media. Do you get it now, folks? Are we starting to put the picture together? So, and I don't mean this to be condescending or anything like that. I'm just trying to say, you know, actually, this didn't share. Let's see if I can get this to share again. No. So what we're reason Q is bringing that up is because this is what we're up against, and Q keeps saying, it's good against evil, and this is really, and you can see NBC, so you can see that this is. You must like that, don't you, Winston? The
Yeah.
emoji. It's all that's how it is. So here Q asked to look into this and asked people to, and he did a close up here, look into what's going on with this charm. Okay, so many people did on the boards, the anons, and some people came up with something similar to this. And here you have, someone depicted as a god, and then you have the fish hanging as a or these are called milagro, or miracles, or offerings.
Hmm.
So these are what's going on. And why is this relevant? Well, this is the artwork in John Podesta's home. You have these little children in their underpants with these red shoes on, sitting on a board, what looks like in a tiled room. And what do we have here? Let's just take a quick look at this. It's going to be disturbing, folks. I just want to warn you. If you don't want to see reality, then you can look away. But this here is the pool of the Vanderbilts. I have seen this before. Can you see these, Winston? There's
Yeah, I can see
there's
them. They're
two
kind of small, but
there's two images here. Okay,
hmm.
here's one. I'm going to move our little faces out of the way, and then here's the other one. The reason this is relevant is you see this pool, and you see these ropes hanging in the pool, and you see it's a tiled surface. Okay, and this is the pool in the Vanderbilt's home, right out of, I think, Asheville, North Carolina. And here you have the picture of John Podesta's artwork, sick as it is. Why do you have children innocently with their hands behind their back on their knees in a tiled room with these ropes hanging? Well, I can tell you, Something has happened in this room. Something horrible has probably happened in this room, and many, many, many times. This pool is not being used for swimming, and it looks stained, very dark stains in it in this picture over on the left. What Q is trying to bring to our attention is the fact that this is who we are up against. These are they do these sacrifices. So this shows you that this is who these people belong to, this is who they worship, and this is how they were doing what they were doing. They were doing it in the privacy of homes, in swimming pools, sacrificing children, trafficking children. Where do all the missing children go, people? So here is your evidence. And of course, we know that the president has all of this, and of course we know that that Sessions has all of this, and these people are going down. All of this ties to, you want to start connecting, where do the children go? And here is the group with the red shoes, and which basically means that they're all involved in this child. Um, they molest the children, they abuse them, they torture them, they kill them, they extract their adrenaline, and then they get high from that. These are very sick people, folks. They are very sick. And they're who runs our world, and sadly, or at least who used to. And now we have a changing of the guard. They don't want to give up power and control. And they did have, it goes all the way to Hong Kong. And this is tied into this was tied into, I think, the Clinton Foundation or the Podesta Foundation. So they're all connected, folks. And this is why Haiti, and of course Q also was talking about Haiti and all these other things.
Oh,
So
yeah.
be prepared. There's really some very disturbing things that are going to come out. We just heard about these over 300 priests in, Winston, you probably heard that the Attorney General in Pennsylvania
Yeah.
released the report from the grand jury report finding over 300 priests guilty of sexual abuse of children, and over 1,000 children. Now, this isn't, seems like every week, Winston, there's another announcement of this happening. So we have to be realistic about what's really happening, what this church is really representing, folks. And it's hiding this kind of business. It's hiding the pedophilia. It's there to seemingly to protect them, because they seem to have um, exemption, from prosecution, which nobody else would have exemption from it. So this is who's running the world, and this is what's changing. And how did all this happen? And some of that's really going to be what Winston's going to talk about today, because why isn't the law, why is it not exactly working the way it should? And so he's going to talk about the historical side of the Admiralty law. And, and you're going to find that all of this just gets connected, and all of it, it's only for us, though, because these people who are committing these crimes, they feel that they're above the law and that they will never be prosecuted. But I have news for them, that, this is what Trump's mission is. He said in his inauguration and after he was inaugurated, during the election, the campaign, that he was going to end child trafficking, or human trafficking, including child trafficking. And that's what he's doing. So it's a good sign. And I also wanted to say that I spoke to Winston just before we got started today about a very, very talented woman who I know, who works with John of God down in Brazil. And I'm hoping to get her on to the GoldFish Report to talk about all of this incredible, wonderful healing. There's new healing lasers, or they're not lasers, it's a crystal bed, it's called. And it's very fascinating stuff. So I'm really hoping to get her to come onto the GoldFish Report and talk about it, or at least I will present it in a way that I can present it to viewers. And I think Winston will be with me to help do that, because it's very, very inspirational. It's fascinating stuff. And I'm happy to report on it. So Winston, what are we going to talk about today specifically?
Well, I was going to give a little bit of the history. About the Admiralty and, how it came onto the land and so forth. And the reason why I'm doing this is, I've given over the last number of interviews and stuff. I've tried to expose historically how we've acted, the circumstances and situations. just on this basis that we were literally born into it. And that is, I mean, I'm 70 years old, but we got young people, you know, who have been born into a system, and they would assume or presume that this is just the way things are, and without, you know, some comprehension of how we came to the circumstances that we presently face, then they would just assume, well, that must be what's right. That must be what's right. And so, in consequence of that, you know, sometimes we have to go back a little ways and find out that what's going on right now is not right. And without that knowledge, we would simply just, you know, continue to act and to accept what's being portrayed to us as being, well, that's just the way things are, so I guess we have to go along with it. Now, we would hope that with these changes that are occurring on the planet, I mean, we talk about Nessara, we talk about Gessara, we talk about global reset of finances, we talk about global reset of currencies and all these kinds of things. Um, you know, the question I always ask is, well, the people who are in charge of doing these things, you know, do they even know the history of how we got to where we're at? And I would suspect some of them do. I would suspect many of them don't. They're simply operatives in the system, or a change in the system that, you know, that they don't know why they're doing this. They really don't. They're just going along with the powers that be, and hopefully, you know, those who are in positions of power uh, have good intentions. Like I had mentioned one time before, or a few times before, I'm not willing to trade just one tyranny for another tyranny. I mean, I've figured out how to function in the old tyranny, at least to a certain level. And so if we're going to go into a new tyranny, I'm going to have to relearn and figure out. But we don't want this. We don't want these things to happen. And again, the energetics that people with knowledge, the energetics that they would insert into the collective consciousness and those kind of things would have a good effect. So my role on this planet, you know, has been, at least in the last number of years, is to be an educator. And so I try to bring, you know, some of these things to people's attention so they can do a real evaluation. You know, okay, here's what happened, how things were, here's what happened, here's what we have today. Is this really the way I want to live? And if it's not the way I want to live, you know, what can be done about it to assure it? And if enough people become educated, or at least have access to the collective consciousness so they can understand, the energetics will change. And so that's why, you know, for instance, you know, I mean, I know perhaps some people were offended on the 4th of July when I gave that report on the Declaration of Independence and went back and analyzed it. And as I have pointed out, Thomas Jefferson was one of the wealthy elite, and he did a good job for what he was doing. I mean, I'm not complaining about what he did. I'm just saying that was what he was. And so now we have another of the wealthy elite who are operating at that level that Jefferson operated at. You know, do we expect? I mean, what do we expect to be the result of it? And so, as for myself, I don't get on bandwagons, you know, and go promoting this, promoting that, or hoorah, hip, 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 hooray for all this kind of stuff. You know, I try to look at it perhaps pragmatically and say, well, here's how it happened previously, you know, 200 some odd years ago. Are we falling into the same thing here now. And so we have to very cautiously and carefully watch. And we're not waving flags. We're not hip hip hooray. We're not hoorahing anything until we see how things actually work. And so, at what point, will NESARA be announced? And what are the prospects once that happens? Because if once a NESARA is actually announced, it mandates a new election within the 120 days. I say within 120 days. Now, for the powers that be that make the announcement of NESARA, what guarantee do we have that they'll actually follow? I have not read NESARA. I mean, there's some things that have leaked out about some of the provisions. We look at, 19 or 20 different things that seem to make pretty good sense. But what does the rest of it say? I don't know. And it's all being held again in secret. The people are not able to see what it is. And, at some point that has to come to an end. I want to see what it says. Am I going to support something that I don't know what the hell it is? No, I'm not. And so we need to see those things. I mean, we're all worried about, the 20 pages of FISA report and all the rest of this stuff. Oh, give me a break. I want to see NESARA. I want to read what it says to see whether or not I'll support it or not. And if I can't see it, I sure in the heck ain't going to support something I don't know what it is. So all this hip hip hooray and hoorahs and all these kind of things, that we typically, would do, we have to be a little bit more practical, I think, if we're really going to see a change for the better. And so, like I say, I'm not trying to throw a wet blanket onto the things that are happening. Myself, I would probably do things differently, some things at least differently than are being presently done. But that's just me. And so I'm not, pointing the finger and saying, well, this leader or that leader, or this or that. But again, I kind of look down the road a little bit because people are constantly asking me, all the technology and everything that we have developed over the years, will it still have applicability when we have these changes? And I don't know. I haven't read what's going to be. I mean, I don't know what they're planning with NESARA. And I personally believe that it is not prudent, and it's certainly not, how shall I say, honest, to implement certain things that would tend one to believe that it's a part of NESARA without actually looking at what NESARA is. And so, when you get politicians and so forth and the wealthy elite, I mean, everybody's, pointing the finger at George Soros, they're pointing fingers at these, wealthy families, the Rockefellers and Rothschilds and all these kind of things. Well, let's take a look, because I'm simply not buying the program just because somebody says, well, this is what it is. I want to see it. I want to see what it says. I want disclosure. I want to see what NESARA is. You're on mute if you're trying to say something.
Yeah, you always catch me, Winston.
Well, I
Thanks.
see your mouth moving. I don't hear nothing, so I have to
Right.
figure that you're on mute.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think that it's wise to answer the way you did, stating that you don't know how it's going to impact, and also I think that we have to realize that we aren't really getting a voice in this, so
No, we're not.
at all. A lot of the times we report, it's for people who are really just, we kind of report on a couple different levels. Like
Uh
some
huh.
of this information Winston talks about and other things are for people who have already been following either us or been following these topics. So there's some information that will be over the head of just beginners coming in. But I'm always conscious of people who are just waking up and just
Yeah.
coming our reports. And so sometimes I put things in basic terms. It makes it sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, but I do. And that's exactly why I do it, because there's people who are just going to be coming to us for the first time, and they don't understand. They may have heard this or that, and that triggered them or caused them to come to our reports. Or start doing research on YouTube or whatever, to start looking for this information. But there's always people, Winston, and I know that you are mindful of it too, who are just kind of just starting to uncover everything. They're just starting to wake up. So there's information, on two different levels. So it's for the beginner and it's for the really the advanced. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's kind of not, not that many in between areas, but I appreciate you mentioning that too, because for some people who, are just starting out, they do need some of um, that basic, knowledge of, kind of how we got here, which is what you're going to present today. So it's really going to be helpful. But it's
Yeah.
the kind of stuff that's useful enough for people who are more advanced but didn't even know this, like you're saying, like people who, there may be some people involved in this era who know how we got here and some who don't. So it's both ways.
Yeah. And I think we did do a report on the SAR at one time, at least the amount of information that we had available to us. And like I say, I mean, this has been talked about, I mean, I first heard about it, I don't know, around 2000,
Mm-hmm.
2001, it started to come out of what had happened. But still, I mean, that's, what, 17 or 18 years ago. I still haven't seen it. Still haven't seen it. And so we're just assuming that it actually exists as a written document somewhere. And so we got our fingers crossed, that,
Right.
that what's being reported to us that we don't have access to is being accurately reported and honestly reported. So, I don't assume anything. I mean, like I say, I'm not prone to get on the bandwagon, and just yell hip hip hooray about something I have no idea what it is. It don't make any sense to me for people to do that. And so, is it really
Mm-hmm.
what we're looking for or not? We don't know. And so we start talking about disclosure, transparency, and all these kind of things. Well, where is the transparency on the SARA? I haven't seen it. And so I'm not saying it's good or I'm not saying it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And that's very irritating to those of us who would be looking into these things and so forth. So again, my recommendation to people is, again, don't be jumping on bandwagons about anything until you have some reasonable uh, information, evidence, and so forth to support your belief. Now, what we can evaluate is history. And so much of what I've tried to, bring to a lot of these reports and so forth is a whole lot of history that perhaps people are simply not uh, aware of. And we can draw conclusions about how we would want to live our lives or what changes we would want to make once we understand what has happened in the past. Do we want to continue with the way things have been done, or we do want to change them? That's the question. And if there is the opportunity to change them, either individually in your own life, or as a community, or as a country, or as a planet, you know, then certainly people would have to have knowledge of what they were getting into. And so today I wanted to spend a little bit of time anyway. We don't need to beat it to death so much, but to go back over some of the historical thought process behind what people call admiralty. I mean, I keep hearing, I hear so much, about uh, people objecting to admiralty, gold-fringed flags, all kinds of things. First off, let me just express, what's presently happening is not admiralty, not at all. I mean, they went way past. I mean, they got admiralty going, but our system today is completely corrupt. It's all tyrannical. It has nothing to do with admiralty law, maritime law, common law, equity law, or anything else. It's simply a bunch of crooks and criminals figured out just another way to fleece the money away from the people.
Absolutely.
The courts
Please.
do not follow any rules.
Nope.
They make them up as they go along. And so again, that's what it's come to. Now, can we change those things? Will the new monetary system change some of that? Yeah, it'll have effect on some of it. Our court systems and so forth. Like I say, when we get into this interim republic concept that we've talked about, even though I had known about that arrangement, way back, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, I still haven't seen their structure. I don't know if the interim government, the only thing I do know about the interim republic is they have set up a new treasury. And that's on the Indian reservation in Reno. That's the only thing I know about is the treasury portion of it. I don't know anything about, are they going to reinstitute the legislative, an executive and judicial branch? We don't know. They're not telling us. And so they say, well, the interim government is here to bring in the SARA. I want to see it.
Yeah. How come we don't get a vote on it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to tell you. So you're not going to stuff that stuff down my throat just because, somebody says that's what we got to do. So, like I say, I've been around way too long to just put up with more stuff. If I do not see that the program is moving us toward the ascension or raising vibrations that we're looking for, I'm not going to support it. I'm not going to. Matter of fact, I might have to start a brand new solutions in commerce just to deal with more problems. I hope not. I'm getting old and getting tired. But what I'm trying to impress on people is just don't suck something down.
Yeah.
Without tasting it first to see if that's really what you want.
That was an analogy. That was a Winstonism. And am I on mute again, Winston? No,
No, you're good.
Yeah, exactly. I also wanted to mention that, we were supposed to have this parade, and I think it was tied into NESARA and the changes on the financial and everything, or it was supposed to be it was supposed to be for the veterans and everything. That was supposed to be a parade in November, and that's been canceled, or it's been postponed until 2019. So everybody's kind of wondering, of course, Q posted and commented on it, that there was a change in timeline. And I thought, well, did you mean to say time frame or timeline? Because I think they're very careful with their words, but this is all tying in. And of course, there was this there was a deadline for all this, I mean, they said 50 years after we landed on the moon, which would put us into July 20th of 2019. So of course, this has been postponed until 2019, as they have announced. So I'm just wondering if I really don't want to have to wait another year, but we don't really have any choice. Let's hope they get this going before then.
Yeah, it could be. Now, because of the re-education of the public and public appeal, I mean, what's Joe Sixpack going to do with all this? That's the question. Mm-hmm. And so they're trying to little by little expose, certain things like this problem of pedophilia, all these different things. But it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard, and and I don't envy those who are having to work in these areas.
Right.
But I mean, it would seem that if the people in the country or on the planet were exposed to what it is that we have the expectation of going to, that it can only enhance the progress. See, this has been one of my major complaints
Mm.
because with the interim government, when it was formed or when it actually went into operation as such back in January of 2015, I mean, I was inside of some of that information. And I knew about the Treasury Reserve notes that was created, and they went to trading on the Forex in the summer of 2015.
Mm.
And many of us, who have been involved in that kind of thought process and in that world, were fully expecting that the new United States notes would be on the streets, available and useful by the fall of 2015. We had that expectation, and then here we are, 3 years later,
Right.
and it's still not out there because, from a psychological point of view, and this is just Winston's philosophy, so you can take it for what it's worth. And that was, going back to, can the American people stand the truth or not? And so somebody has decided they can't. Now, who decided that? That's what I want to know. Who decided that the people can't
Mm.
stand the truth? I mean, I wasn't a part of that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And so somebody made a decision, well, the people can't handle the truth, so we got to keep holding these things back, and we got to go do this, and we got to go do that. That's why I made that comment the other day. A hillbilly knows if there's a fox in the hen house, you don't go and be polite to it. You deal with it on the spot, because if you don't, you're going to lose more chickens. That's just plain and simple common logic. And when I see all these reports, and you can't hardly see very many of these reports hitting, but there's people literally, living in camps, living in tents, living up under the highway. I mean, I have a good life. Every night when I go to bed in a warm, comfortable bed, and I pray every night for those who don't have that. And so, talk's cheap. And so we can pray all we want to, but unless we get out and do something about it. And so, what I had felt, what made good logical sense to me with the experience and things, that I had in my life, I was fully expecting and supporting the introduction of the United States notes as the, how shall I say, the oil on the water to calm the water. Because again, if the people generally can carry on their life, they can go to the store, they can buy gasoline, they can pay their light bill and all that kind of stuff. If they have that, they're not going to panic, when they expose, some of these really bad things that are happening. That's my psychological belief. And I personally think that those who have made these decisions not to give disclosure to the people about all of these things. I ain't talking about flying saucers and ETs and all that junk. I'm talking about the what's going on in our plant in our physical world. So somebody made a decision that people can't stand the truth. And I keep saying, if you just let them know that the sky's not falling in, that they can go to the grocery store, get what they need for their families, pay their bills, all these kind of things. Whatever you tell them after that, it'd be ever so much easier, ever so much easier. But if people feel like they're being threatened for their livelihood,
Right.
if they're not going to be able to keep the lights on, they're not going to be able to keep the heat on in the middle of the winter, that's what causes the problems.
Right.
And so, I disagree psychologically
Mm-hmm.
with the way this thing's being handled. And my firm belief, was way back in 2015, if they'll just bring this new money and get the monetary system up and running. I wrote that article on the two-tiered money system. If they just put people into a calm, peaceful circumstance, then you can tell them all about all these corrupt things, and it won't put them into shock. They won't go into fear because they know they can still go to the grocery store and get their groceries. I mean, this is ridiculous. That's why I say a lot of this stuff that goes on, I just don't pay much attention to it. I look at all the things going on. It's like a giant soap opera. I don't watch soap operas. And but anyway, that's just me. That's just me. That's after 70 years of being on this planet. That's the way I see things. Am I right? Am I wrong? Well, we won't know if I'm right because we didn't do it that way now, did we? But my point being, we can't, there are certain things which have contributed to the circumstance, that we live under. And most people were born into it. They don't know anything different. And so when I go back in history, just a few years or sometimes several years, go back and say, well, okay, here's what happened. And here's the results of it. What I'm trying to impress on people is, we don't have to repeat those things once those things have been removed, if they do get removed. Because like I say, it's tragic. I mean, see, when you start to talk about opportunities, what opportunities came from the Declaration of Independence? What opportunities could have been? And were those opportunities seized? Were those opportunities used? And you go to the Constitution, you go to the formulation of a formal government and the Constitution and so forth, and then there's certain opportunities that could have been available to the people. And then the first thing you see is an unconstitutional move by the commander-in-chief who went and attacked the sovereign state of Pennsylvania. What? And so, history is not exactly like people have been exposed to. That's why I brought in that Howard Zinn guy. He tells it like it is, and he's got the history to prove it. And so, sometimes we just need a reality check. I mean, aside from all the good feelings and flag waving and all these kind of things, sometimes we have to look at, exactly what did happen. So anyway, today I want to talk a little bit more about some of the concepts of what is called admiralty. And let me assert that in our court system today, even though there are certain elements that would give someone the idea that we're operating under admiralty law, we're not. And so, but you don't know that unless you know what it is. And so anyway, we'll talk a little bit that day. If you're ready, maybe I'll do a little bit of a screen share. There's one article I'll send to you. And it is this one here. Now, this is a bit technical for most people that haven't been exposed. And so I'll send this to you so people can have it. But this is, fairly complex for someone who hadn't been exposed. And so what I'm going to attempt to do is to get down to a Winston level of discussion about these things. And so let's see here. All right. So what I did, I put together a few things that would be helpful to see the history, how things developed. Because admiralty law is good law. It really is. Because you're able, like I say, I would prefer to use admiralty law myself if I were using any kind of particular form. But anyway, the what's called admiralty maritime And let me just also mention the words admiralty and maritime are not the same word. Historically, the admiralty referred to the king or the potentate or the government or whoever. Anyway, it was the king's system using the king's money. In other words, the state money.
Hmm.
Now, maritime had reference to the merchants. So the maritime had reference to, you know, people that had ships, you know, and went across the oceans and did trade and all these kind of things, and they had their own money. But basically, when the merchants either decided or were forced to using the king's currency, the king's money, that's when the two of them melded together, because the maritime was actually law, merchant law. And so you remember we talked about uh, William the Conqueror and the city of London and the merchants holding out and maintaining their own law, merchant law. Well, that's maritime.
Mhm.
And so people, you know, historically conceded that they're two different things,
Okay.
but they eventually became melded together on the basis of the money they were using. And so again, you know, there's a certain amount of provisions and things, you know, I mean, I can't define all those things. It'd take me, you know, a month of study just to kind of maybe see all the different things. But I'm just trying to say that historically, that's how things have developed, you know, since, I don't know, the 12th century. All right. Now, historically, if there was a dispute, now, if everything would work just fine, you know, and there weren't any problems, there were no disputes, then, you know, the commerce went on, you know, lickety split, no problems. But let's say, for instance, there may be a dispute. Let's give an example, perhaps, on the sailor's wages. In other words, let's say, you know, a sailor got on the ship, he worked on the thing, and he didn't get paid. Now he's got a dispute. So how does he get a resolution, you know, to his problem, you know, to get paid for his service and so forth. So anyway, when the ship, you know, made port, the sailor would go and file a complaint in the Admiralty Court. He actually go file a complaint with them. All right. Now, when that court received that complaint, the clerk of the court would send the bailiff of the court, the bailiff, out to the dock, and the bailiff would actually secure the ship to the dock. I mean, they put chains on it, they put ropes on it, they might put guards out there to prevent this vessel from going back to sea, you know, where they wouldn't be able to, you know, put a hand on them.
Right.
All right. So the clerk of the court sent the bailiff out to the docket. We'll get into that in just a minute here. There's a little
Nice.
bit of play on words here, but we'll get into that in a minute. So I'm just kind of getting your mind going a little bit of where we're going with some of this.
Okay.
All right. So they went out and secured the ship to the dock so that it could not escape. All right. Now, once the vessel itself, now I'm using this word vessel on purpose because it's going to come up. We get down a little bit further in our thought process here. So when the vessel was restrained, the clerk would send a summons to the ship's owner to come to court. We got a dispute over here. So in other words, they didn't summons the captain of the ship. They summons the owner. Okay, so the clerk summons the owner to the court. I mean, a warrant would go out or whatever. Okay, so the owner shows up in court, and he says, "Hey, you got my ship chained to the dock out here. I got business to do, and so I'm going to need to get a release on the restraint of my commerce, because my ship represents my commerce. So the question is, how does the owner of the vessel secure the release of the vessel so they can go back to do commerce? All right. So under the Admiralty, then, in order to secure the release of the vessel, the owner would have to appear in the court with a fiduciary and sureties. It could be in the form of a bond. And that surety would have to at least match the claim of the sailor who was claiming that he had not been paid wages. Okay? So that's how it worked. Now, so when the owner showed up with a fiduciary, are you starting to get a drift for some of the things we've done in the past? All right, so when the owner showed up with a fiduciary and a surety, then the bailiff would go out and simply release the ship. And then it could go back to sea and start doing commerce, blah, blah, blah. And in the meantime, in the court was going to hear the claim of the sailor and determine whether or not the sailor had some money coming to him.
So this was a bondsman type transaction.
Well, the owner had to bring in a bond,
right,
or a surety, and deposit it with the court. A bond is just a guarantee of the surety.
Right, but it's the bond process. The bond,
It could be used that way, or they could actually show up with. Let's say the sailor was claiming he was owed $100 in gold, and so the owner could show up and posit with the court $100 in gold, and that would be the same thing. Or they could bring a bond in. Let's say they went to their bank and said, "Okay, I've got all this gold here in the bank and everything, so I need a bond over here to satisfy this matter," without actually physically taking the gold to the court. So a bond could be used in that manner. All right, so again, we're just talking about resolutions of problems here. How are we going to solve a problem? A sailor worked on this ship. I mean, the thing sailed all the way from, I don't know, the tip of South America all the way into London Harbor and stuff like that. He didn't get paid. He should have been paid. So how does he resolve his problem, this dispute? He goes to the Admiralty. He goes to the Admiralty. And that's how they were able to, fix all those problems. Okay, so you have any questions so far about how that kind of little thing worked?
Nope, that's pretty clear.
Okay. And that's pretty straightforward. I mean, that only makes good, reasonable, common sense.
Sure.
How that would work.
Sure.
All right, now I want to talk about a little bit here about the Admiralty courts moving onto the land. All right, now the court itself would be on the land. I mean, it'd be an Admiralty court, it'd be a maritime court, just however you want to call it. But it would actually be physically on land. And so when the ship came into port, they would go to the physical location of the court to do their business and so forth. All right. Well, so at that time, certainly in our history, we had courts of admiralty, we had common law courts, which basically people call courts of law. And so they're on the sea to resolve a dispute, you would go to the Admiralty. But on the land, if you had a dispute, you would go to the courts of law, or what people call common law courts, because that was on the land. Now, the Admiralty courts were perhaps jealous of all the business that the common law courts were getting. And so the Admiralty was thinking up different ways that they could start to do a little bit of, it's what we call sheep stealing.
Sheep stealing, yep. That's
yeah, they're doing sheep stealing. Yep. And that was the Admiralty courts perhaps were envious of the revenue that was coming through the common law courts, and so they were devising means and methods that they could usurp the jurisdiction of the common law courts.
Mm.
And so again, they started moving up the waterways.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as everybody should know, salt water is, you can't drink salt water, it'll kill you.
Mm-hmm.
It's poisonous. It's poisonous. But the fresh water, you know, you can drink fresh water. Well, you have to drink fresh water, you're going to die. So what the admiralty courts were doing, they were slowly but surely moving up the waterways on the basis that ships were doing commerce up the waterways. And so this is the method that was used by the admiralty to start to take control of more and more of the disputes that were technically a part of the common law courts. And so again, they were in competition for business. That's all it amounts to. So anyway, now just as a little side note, you know, I've put here that our roads and highways are considered to be rivers of tar. And so we have vessels negotiating up these rivers of tar.
That's a stretch, huh? And nobody picked up on this. They were okay with it.
Yeah, it's pretty much a stretch, but it's a stretch that they've gotten into.
Roads.
Yeah, so they, I mean, aside from the fresh waterways and stuff, then they started to, you know, just think about it. I mean, it's just a play
Rivers
on words. But yeah, but the highways are rivers of tar.
That's how they usurp.
So that's how, I mean, we do commerce, and then you get up into the air. You got rivers, you know, you got jet streams and all. You know, the reason why they call it a jet stream.
Oh man, this is to make the air a river too. So now we don't have any. So we don't have different. There's not 4 categories of matter in the universe.
No.
The admiralty courts know physics better than anybody else. They can manipulate physics like nobody can see.
Yeah. So we got rivers of tar, we got jet streams, and we got the admiralty trying to claim jurisdiction all places.
Gee whiz.
Now, what really facilitated the admiralty court concept was what happened in 1933.
Right.
When we have a switch from substance to negotiable instruments. See, again, the demise of common law was because of what, you know, we had talked about. We went over that one time. We went over that article by Lee Brobst, and he pointed these things out, that technically a contract does not exist where it's made. It exists where it's paid. And if you can't pay a contract doesn't exist. And so, again, the things that happened in 1933 was the switch from the substance gold currency to strictly negotiable instruments. Common law died because it was impossible to pay a contract. And so once the common law itself was gone, then what slipped in to fill the void? The admiralty. And so that's why most of our proceedings that we see have, even though, like I said, they don't even follow their own rules, we see many elements of the admiralty in our present court system, you see. So again, you see how the thing evolved and how it moved along into the system. So again, this is just a little bit of history, so that people can think these things through. Because, like I say, without a knowledge of how things had been, then you don't know how we got to where we're at. And most people were simply born into it. I was born in 1948. I mean, that's 15 years. after 1933. And I was fully 50 years old before I even come to these realizations.
Mm.
And most of the people, in the country, on the planet, haven't even come to it yet. And that's why we have these interviews and stuff, so we can inform people about some of this, for their knowledge. So now let's move into how it works presently.
Oh, it gets better than this. They don't only
Oh yeah,
claim. Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Right, Winston?
yeah, it gets better. It depends on your point of view. It's either getting a lot better or it's getting a lot worse.
Exactly. I was being sarcastic.
Well, if people, have never been exposed to this, I can see where everybody gets confused. I mean, I'm constantly getting, emails and stuff from people that are totally confused about what goes on. So that's why we do these educational things, to bring people up to speed a little bit, so that you can make a determination for yourself. And that was my point when we first started it out. I can't make a determination about Nasara. I haven't seen it.
Right, exactly.
And so it's the same thing with people. They say, well, I'm confused about this over here. I'm confused about this court. I'm confused about some of the things that are going on. And so that's, what I try to do is give as much information about some of these situations so that people can make a choice. It's all about free will. I've said many times in these interviews, you can't have free will if the right choice is not available. You can't do it. I mean, if all you have are the wrong choices, you can't say that you have free will. And so again, as educators, we try to bring information in that would give the people the opportunity to make the right choice and exercise free will. Now, this planet was designated as a free will planet. We're not under the hive mentality of some of the other planets. There are other planets. I mean, I've read about some of them that do not have free will. They operate on the hive mentality. I mean, and there's some of the aliens that we're very familiar with, the ones called mantids. They have a hive mentality.
I think the Zetas do too.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the Zetas, but the mantids are pretty much hive mentality, even though they do have individual capacity to think for themselves. But the decisions they make to act are basically on the hive mentality. Now, we don't have that among humans, or we should not have that among humans. The planet was designated as a free will planet. And so the only way that you can have free will is if you make the right choice, and you can't make the right choice if it's not available. That's why we do education.
Right.
So again, like I say, that at least justifies our efforts here with these GoldFish reports and everything. We're trying to put out good information that people can make decisions by. So let's kind of see how it works a little bit. Some of the pitfalls perhaps that we run into trying to analyze what goes on. Now again, the first item here is according to the U.S. government styles manual and several other manuals. I mean, you can look at several other states and different ones that have put out style manual about the English language. I mean, there's rules of it. I mean, I went to high school. I took English and all that kind of stuff. I learned about grammar. I learned about spelling, all these kind of things. And so there are rules to the use of our language and the use of our grammar. And I don't know what they're teaching in the schools today, but English grammar was my worst subject. I didn't do too well. I mean, how hillbillies are about talking and everything. We have kind of a hard time with it. But anyway, in the U.S. government styles manual, it simply says, okay, here's the rule. This is a rule that anything written in all capital letters is either a U.S. vessel, a corporation, or a dead person.
Yep.
Look at all the U.S. vessels. Go on the internet and look up all the ships, you know, and everything. How do they spell their names? All capital letters. Go look at any corporation. How's that corporation signified? All capital letters. Go to the cemetery. Look on the tombstones. How are all the names of the dead people spelled? All
All
capital letters.
capital letters.
So they're following the rules.
And what do we
Huh?
see on our birth
Birth
certificate and social
certificate.
security cards? All
Yeah. That's why
capital.
I call the
I know
birth
that's where we're
certificate death
going.
certificate. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not going to get into that in particular unless it comes up. But
Well,
I'm just trying to point out that under the Styles Manual, anything in all capital letters is either a U.S. vessel, a corporation, or a dead person. And especially if it's a U.S. vessel, what would be the jurisdiction?
Admiralty, of course, or
Oh, dear.
maritime. Well, I mean maritime.
There
It's
you, well,
fine.
Admiralty Maritime, yeah.
Yeah.
Because again, the money situation. All right. So now we have some reasonable expectation that if we see a situation, if there's a dispute and if it's being settled in a court or something like that, typically the different parties and so forth would be written in all capital letters, signifying that it should be an admiralty proceeding. Again, I don't have a problem with admiralty. I have a problem with the bastardization of admiralty. That's what I have the problem with.
Right. Like,
But anyway, the admiralty would you would see the parties that are involved in that in all capitals. Now, when we've had these interviews where I've talked about the private and the public, on the private side, you don't see capital letters because we had that long discussion about habeas corpus.
right.
We had discussions about commercial lien. Some of these things, all those are on the private side. We're using proper grammar, upper and lower case letters to signify the parties in those operations. Okay, but not so in the admiralty because we're talking about U.S. vessels, corporations, and dead people. So anyway, let's talk about a claim. Now, again, when you get into the admiralty, the word claim comes up, and it can probably be best defined as a statement of ownership of a title, not ownership of the vessel, but the ownership of the title to the vessel. Okay, and so again, look at your birth certificate. That's a claim. That's a claim by the state as to the title of the body. Now, it is our habit, and one which we simply just do historically, and that is when a new baby is born, we give it a name. And so when that name is given on the original MSO that we talked about,
right,
then the state comes along and they put in a claim of title. And the claim of title is written in all capital letters. So the title to the title to the baby is different than the name of the baby. The title to the baby is written in all capital letters, signifying that it's a U.S. vessel, it's in the admiralty.
well, how did it become a U.S. vessel, Winston?
By writing his name in all capital letters. The title to the baby. I didn't say the name.
I know,
the title to the baby. Huh?
I know, but how did it go into the admiralty jurisdiction at all? It's a baby. It's a human being.
Because if you look in the statutes say that the ownership of all property is in the state. So if the state owns the baby, especially if the baby is a product of a licensed marriage, or if it's delivered by a licensed MD or a licensed midwife or something like that, it's automatically the property of the state. Don't the mother give the baby to the doctor?
But don't we, we're live human beings, though. How did we go under admiralty? We're not vessels. We're not ships parking, docking at
Well,
port.
that's my whole point of reclaiming your status and assets to own your body. Prior to doing that, it is assumed and presumed that the state owns your body.
Because by virtue of you going through the birth canal, you're on,
Oh,
you're on, but if you were a delivered cesarean section, you are not considered a vessel because that was not birthed in
I was
the
listening
same
to I listened to a comedian the other day, and he said, what's the guy's name? Stephen Wright or something like this. Guy's crazy. He's funny as heck to watch. But he said that he deadpans everything. He just has a straight face when he says everything.
way. Oh man, I bet
He
it's
says
real
that
funny.
he was a cesarean birth.
Hmm.
He said now when he leaves the house, instead of going out the front door, he goes out the window. Okay, anyway, just follows joke.
Sorry, I'm not following that. It's going to take a
Okay,
little bit more time on a Friday morning for me to get that one.
he says he was a cesarean birth baby.
Hmm.
So now when he leaves the house, he doesn't go out through the front door. He goes out through a window.
I heard you. I still don't get
Oh,
it.
dude.
I mean,
Okay, well,
okay,
when,
sorry.
when you
I mean,
get it, you can laugh about it.
well, I mean, I get it. I just don't think it's funny. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All
I
right.
don't think it's funny.
Well, I thought it was hilarious. But anyway,
Oh, okay.
because you brought up cesarean.
Okay, well, but you're not going through the birth canal at all. So
No.
you shouldn't be considered a vessel if you're not going through the birth canal.
Well,
The
okay.
admiralty law has taken jurisdiction over a woman's vagina. That's
You
amazing.
you could make that argument, but it'd be a whole lot easier just to go through the process on that DVD.
Well, I'm explaining why they claim jurisdiction of
I
a
know.
woman's vagina is because it's a birth canal and you're born through the canal, and since a canal holds water and you're in water and you're delivered through water. Oh, this is what they do.
You're
This is,
delivering salt water.
yeah, amniotic fluid. That's when
Yeah,
life was good, being in that.
yeah. There's all kinds of analogies we can draw a lot of these things, but we're just trying to put people in the mind to kind of think about some of these things. Again,
But that's how we
it,
got into it, though, Winston. I mean, I'm
yeah,
just trying to help connect the dots for some people who might not
sure.
realize that that's why. Why would we be considered, you know, a vessel? Why would we have? Why would we have all capital letters when we go to court or when
Yeah.
it's on our
Well,
social
we're gonna
security
get a little
card?
bit more into
Okay,
that.
okay.
But early on, I was setting up how it originally
I know.
worked, with vessels and sailors and bailiffs and all that kind of stuff. All
Uh,
right. So anyway,
all right. Sorry to disturb your thought process there, Winston, but we're back. Had to make a stop.
okay, yeah, I just had to change the sun's coming up again, so I had to move around a little bit. Anyway, so again, the word claim comes up,
Hmm.
and that's found in admiralty terms. Claim.
Hmm. Yeah.
So anyway, a claim is a statement of ownership of a title.
Hmm.
So we had talked a little bit how the state had bootstrapped their way into
Yeah.
claim of title on a new baby. And then, times past, we've talked about how to rectify that problem. Some people might want to go back and review that one particular report we did on authentication. So that would be good for people to go back and review that. So today I'm kind of just giving the history that would cause us to have to do something like that. I mean, for crying out loud,
Yeah. We're all vessels.
it's such a crazy, convoluted bunch of craziness. It's hard to figure out. This had all this technology had to come out of the state hospital, in my estimation, because that's just crazy.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's just plumb crazy.
Mm.
Anyway, item number 3 here, as I wrote it, a claim is made before an admiralty maritime court. In other words, when you go in, when somebody goes into court, they're making a claim on the title, because you always see the defendant in a civil or criminal matter spelled how? always in capital letters,
Hmm.
always. Okay, so that's a claim on the title to the body or the products, proceeds, and fixtures that have been created by that body. That's
Okay,
what.
so this is what gives them the right to then take the straw man and go to the
Don't
treasury.
give them a right. Don't use that word.
Well, they think they have the right to do it, but it's illegal.
No, okay. Don't use the word right because it gives them a false impression about what's being considered here.
Okay, so
They're making a claim.
they're making a claim, but anybody can make a claim. Doesn't mean it's a bona fide claim,
Well, of course not.
right?
Matter of fact, in a fiction court, there is no such thing as a bona fide claim.
Well, admiralty is a fiction court, though, for humans anyway.
Yeah, see, we don't have gold and silver. So how can you make a bona fide claim? You can't because you can't execute. Anyway,
Okay, keep going.
let me keep going here so I don't get bogged down in some of this.
It's just that this is really it. This is the basis for it all, and
Well, sure it
it
is.
is complicated when people find themselves in a situation. You walk into a courtroom and they say you have no rights, and you're like, yes, I
I agree. I don't.
and people don't get it. They don't understand why they don't. Like, no.
Well, it's kind of funny. One time I was in traffic court one time, and I don't know what I said exactly. Oh yeah, the traffic judge read Miranda rights, and he said, "Do you understand your rights?" As I read them, I said, "No." He said, "What part of that don't you understand?" I said, "Any of it."
Right, you don't stand under him.
And then he said, "Are you some kind of constitutionalist?" I said, "Do I have constitutional rights?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Well, I don't waive any of that." The guy just doing this, pounding his head trying to say, "What just happened?" I didn't say I had constitutional rights. He said it. I said,
Okay,
"Okay." I said, "If I have them, then I said I'm not going to waive any of them."
right. And then what
Well,
happened next, Winston?
well, anyway, let's not get off on stories.
But no, what jurisdiction did he put you in?
Well, traffic, it's the same thing. There's not any jurisdiction.
Okay.
It's just a quagmire of moneymakers. It's all it is. There's no
Oh,
jurisdiction in any of these courts. It's just all it's all foolishness. Anyway, a claim is made in the admiralty court. In essence, the claimant is saying that he has a lien against the title, which again is defendant in all capital letters. So the claimant saying that he has a lien against the title for X amount of money.
mhm.
Now, people have to understand this. A lien is a temporary, emphasis on temporary. A lien is a temporary transfer of title. In essence, it's an arrest warrant of the title. That's what it is. Now, so when somebody comes in with a claim into the court, and we've talked a little bit more about the technicalities of this, a few times before. But anyway, when somebody, an attorney or just somebody, comes into the court with a claim on title that we would call a complaint, uh, the clerk who receives it in the admiralty court, as it were, issues a summons to the last known owner of the vessel to come to court and defend his claim on the title against the new claim on the title. And so again, if you kind of visualize it in this manner, it might be helpful to you. All right, so again, it's a battle on claim on title because that's the only thing that's being talked about in that court, isn't it? The title, the name spelled in all capital letters. So it's a dispute on who has the right to the title to the property. It's not about the property. That don't come till later. But again, it's a dispute on who has the claim on title. All right. So
Muted again. Sorry, there, but they don't teach you this. We're totally ignorant of this.
I'm doing it now.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is that this information is deliberately kept from us so that they can
Yeah.
exploit us and fleece us like sheep. I mean,
Uh,
honestly, there's no other reason why we're not given the information uh, by the authorities who are imposing this on us. They should,
yeah.
it should be available. Yeah, definitely. I
Well,
mean,
it
we're
is
doing
available if people just not aware of it, don't know where to look until somebody pops up and says, "Hey, look at this over here." Like I wasn't knowledgeable about this until
yeah.
I was 50 years old, and we were holding a law class, and then somebody come in and said, "Hey, I just got some cassette tapes here on the what was called commercial redemption." So we started listening to that, and the first word we came to that caused us confusion
Mm,
because it did not exist in the law system we were studying, and the word was claim.
mm.
We spent 2 weeks studying that word so that we would know what it was. You see?
It's a battle over the title
Yeah, it's a
of.
battle over the title.
Mhm.
Yeah, again, and that's all that it is. And so, people, like I say, when we get involved in mortgage foreclosures and stuff,
Mhm.
there's a battle over the title, and also then there becomes a battle over possession.
Right.
So title and possession are two separate things. That's why we spent that time talking about trust law.
Mhm.
Anyway, okay, so the clerk issues a summons to the owner, the last known owner of the vessel, who is probably more in the realm of a registered agent. You want to study registered agent technology. Let me put it that way. Anyway, we don't get off on that. That's a whole different subject. Anyway, so when the vessel or the straw vessel, as it is, shows up, it's arrested in the sense that it's bound to the dock.
Mhm.
It little play on words there, but
Yeah.
that's why I gave that history so you know about the bailiff going out and putting a chain on the ship.
Okay.
So it's the same thing here. I mean, words have meaning. And so anyway, the vessel, the straw man vessel, as it were, they put a chain on it and they lock it to the docket. Okay. Now, when the alleged owner shows up at the court to secure the release of the vessel,
Mhm.
it is proper to produce a fiduciary and surety for the vessel to be released.
Okay.
We've worked this technology for a long time now. All right. And so again, in order for the ship, the vessel to do commerce, it can't be locked to the docket. And so in consequence of that, the owner, or more properly registered agent for that vessel, would need to bring fiduciaries. Most people bring attorneys, which is really stupid. It means a waste of money.
Mhm.
So they bring an attorney or some other fiduciary to the matter. For instance, in a juvenile matter, one time one of my juveniles had a court case going on, and so they like an idiot, they wouldn't list my name on there. So I came into the matter as a fiduciary, and by golly, I settled it.
I'm sure you appointed the other attorney as the fiduciary.
Didn't need to. Didn't need to. I wanted to handle the whole thing myself. But anyway, yeah, appointment of fiduciary. We might go over that. If we have a little time, we might talk about that a little bit so people know about that. Because we talked about it in the past.
Mhm.
But anyway, so when the owner slash registered agent shows up at the court to secure the release from the docket of the vessel, he has to bring fiduciaries and surety, just like in ancient times.
Mhm.
Now, some people, will
Excuse me.
put up a bail bond in a criminal matter. It's the same principle. It's the same
Right.
process here. what most people are not doing. They're not bringing in a fiduciary.
Mm.
Okay. So we've developed a whole technology to deal with appointment of fiduciaries, and it works very well.
And that's called appointment of fiduciary, or is that under another
Yeah,
name?
yeah. Well, let me just,
Okay.
I'll just bring it up so people can see what we've
Okay.
done with
I
it.
think that's an important thing to talk about because um, somebody otherwise. So what happens is if you don't, you become the fiduciary, and that's what gives them.
No, you're not the fiduciary. That's the whole point.
No, you're not. But if you don't take control of that and bring somebody in as the fiduciary, then they make you responsible, or your straw man the fiduciary. They make you responsible for that.
Yeah. Now here's an
Is
example.
that right, Winston?
It's not exactly technically correct. The way you said it's not exactly technically correct. But let's
Okay.
look at this here. This is typical how we would appoint a fiduciary.
Uh-huh.
Typically, we would appoint the fiduciary for the plaintiff, the attorney for the plaintiff as the fiduciary. See, a lot of people don't realize this, but all attorneys in bar represent both parties. Because you had talked about in some of these divorce cases that go on, these attorneys know each other and they do
Yeah.
churning.
Churning. Right. Exactly.
Well, the reason they can do that is because the attorney for the plaintiff, the attorney for the defendant represent both parties. They
Well,
represent both parties.
well, how do you get that? I mean, I understand it, but I
That's
want to
the
explain
that's
it
the
for the
that's the agreement the attorneys have made over the years.
right.
That's how they can get away with that. And there's no conflict of interest for them to do that because the attorney for the plaintiff also represents the defendant, and the attorney for the defendant also represents the plaintiff. That's how crazy this is.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, we didn't really know
So
that,
our solution to the problem
right?
is to nominate and make an appointment of fiduciary to the attorney.
Mhm.
Now they really are our fiduciary. They're not there to represent, they're there to settle as fiduciary. And
Mhm.
this has been very effective. Very effective over the years. First time I used that was 2004, and I've given that out in seminars ever since. Really effective. Anyway, I won't go into all the details of this particular thing here, but as much as you'd ask about it, here is a typical appointment of fiduciary. Now, some of this is pretty technical as far as understanding of it and stuff. So it'd be important if somebody wants to use this
Mhm.
technology to
Mhm.
get that DVD on a civil court, where these things are discussed. So, like I say, really, I mean, every time I've ever presented this concept in a seminar, where I can draw pictures on the board, whiteboard, stuff like that, it don't take me very long into that. People start laughing. They think it's ever so funny what I'm doing. And it is. But the attorneys can't cry about it. They've done it to themselves. Because, like I say, this one time I was helping a fella, uh, and it was a criminal matter, and the uh, the public defender, was it involved in it. I told him it's the first thing I got to do is get rid of that public defender. I said, you ain't gonna get nothing done in this court with that, because again, both attorneys represent both parties. So the public defender not only was representing the defendant, he was also representing the prosecution. Now, how does that work out? So I said, you got to get rid of that guy. So he tried 3 times to fire the guy, and he wouldn't go away. I said, okay, let's go ahead and appoint a fiduciary then. So we did. We put the paperwork together and put it into the court, and that guy, he went to the judge and tried to beg off of it at that point. Because technically, if the defendant's found guilty,
Mhm.
who goes to jail? The fiduciary for the defendant. See, like I say, when I first started to develop this, I had a fellow down in where I was living at, and he was an attorney, and he, as far as I knew, he was an honest man. Like I say, he started out as a Vietnam veteran, and he went to work on the L.A. Police Department. Then he went to law school, and so he came with all of that experience under his belt. He knew what the real world was, and so when he became an attorney, he operated based on his prior experience. So I had a great deal of confidence in him individually. But anyway, he liked to get together with me, talk over things. You know, he wanted to know what kind of new wild stuff I dreamed up. So, and he was blind. I mean, he had very, very poor vision. He could barely make his way. So his wife would always come with him, you know, to help him and everything, read his paper to him and stuff. So anyway, you know, you couldn't always watch his eyes to see what his reaction would be. So anyway, so we was having dinner, you know, and so he was wanting to know what kind of new stuff I'd come up with, you know, and so I told him about this appointment of fiduciary. And I watched him as it started, as the gears were turning in his brain. I was watching his face, and pretty soon he kind of got a smile on his mouth. His smile got bigger and bigger. Finally, he bust out laughing. He said, "You're exactly right." He said, "The fiduciary goes to jail." He said, "How quick can you get that paper to me?" Because he wanted to use it. Because again, up in the county where he was working, he didn't think the public defenders were adequately helping out their clients, and he wanted to put a stop to it. So he wanted to go up there and start appointing fiduciaries against some of these public defenders, and he got warned off. The judge said, "No, we ain't doing that." At least not for him. He couldn't allow that attorney to start this appointment of fiduciary for these people. So he stopped on that. Eventually, this guy actually got a chance to argue a case from the U.S. Supreme Court. So he moved up pretty good. But anyway, on this particular information, which is the information I gave to him, this is how you go about doing it. And like I say, if you want to learn more about that process and so forth, then you should get that DVD on civil court. They work in criminal the same way. So anyway, that's how that. But let's get back to this other here. Let's see. We're on this one here. Yeah. All right. Now, so we're down to looks like number 7. So the fiduciary should bring a bond or a surety. Now, this is necessary so that the original owner on the title would have a position to argue from, or his fiduciary would.
Can I just ask you to define the term fiduciary for viewers who might
not be familiar? It's basically the same word as trustee.
Or the responsible payee.
It's the trustee. Again, you know, we talked about previously how the straw man is a trust.
Right.
So if we were talking about trust law, we would call him a trustee. But if we're over here in court, you could call him a trustee, but you could right. in the admiralty you would call him a fiduciary.
Okay, but in more simple terms for people, you're saying
one who acts for someone else.
But but the one who's responsible for the payment. That's
it could be if that's what it came to.
Right. If it's a payment, if it's a I just wanted it to be very clear. So that
just like that blind attorney, when he started laughing, he said, "You're right." He said the fiduciary is one that goes to jail.
Right.
Yeah. So if the case is found against the defendant, the fiduciary is the one either responsible to pay it off or to go to jail. That's what caused that blind attorney to start laughing. He thought that was really funny.
Yeah.
I did too.
Yeah.
I laughed along with him.
Right.
But anyway, that's the way it really works. So again, the fiduciary may put up a bond, or he may actually make a deposit of money in the court. He could do it that way. He could put up a bond. Any way so that the fiduciary has a position to argue from. See, so when you have a dispute of claim, then in order for the vessel owner or his fiduciary to be able to defend the claim of the title of the owner, you got to put something up
Mm-hmm.
in order to secure the release of the ship from the dock. That's just the traditional way admiralty works. And there was good reason for him to do it that way. And so what we have evolved into today, in today's world, when we start talking about admiralty, is again, we go back to the historical procedures and so forth. That's my point. Now, of course, like I mentioned, it's been bastardized.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to point out how it should work if we were operating in admiralty properly. That's my point. Now, are we acting properly? Well, sometimes yes, mostly not. So anyway, so the bond put up to guarantee that the owner can, dispute the lien, blah blah blah. Okay, now what would the owners or the defendant or the fiduciary for the defendant, what would his position be if he makes a dispute? Now, he might agree with it. He might agree that sailor didn't get paid, so he goes and pays him. That's the end of it. But what if the owner disputes the sailor's wages? See, then he would have to do what? Oops.
Mm-hmm.
He would have to put in a counterclaim.
Yeah, always.
As an offset to the claim of the sailor. It's a counterclaim. It's an offset.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the question gets going to be, it's kind of like a ping pong match. The ball goes back and forth. This guy makes a claim, this guy makes a counterclaim, this guy, disputes it, and blah, blah, blah. That's what courts are for, is to settle disputes.
Court, back and forth, tennis court.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, that's what it is.
Another play on words in the court system.
Yeah. And so you'll notice, especially on some of the things we've shown in the past, where I've shown answer and counterclaim type documents and stuff. Again, because we're in double entry bookkeeping. Counterclaim is mandatory, unless you just want to capitulate and say, okay, I'll pay the sailor's wages. But if there's a dispute and the owner says, hey, that sailor's not entitled to $100 in gold, there may be other mitigating circumstances that would prevent that. So he needs to come in with a counterclaim. And again, because of our money system and because of our accounting system, counterclaims are mandatory. People generally don't do it.
Yeah,
But they don't know to do it.
So when they don't do it, then they basically accept whatever the claim
They're
is.
in dishonor.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's kind of pretty much what I wanted to show about, how the system evolved and then how it should operate, and then to demonstrate that it's probably not operating that way in the course that you're working. Now, could you draw those things back in? Yeah, you could. The easiest way, again, is to appoint a fiduciary and let him deal with it. See, people, because they have no knowledge of admiralty procedure, they don't know that they're supposed to come to court with a fiduciary. They come with an attorney with whom they don't even have a contract.
Well, tell people who do they really want to have as a fiduciary? What's the best?
Anybody you want. Like I say, the easiest way is appoint the attorney for the other party as a fiduciary. Again, going back to, let me just go back to this.
I have a question. Whenever you're ready.
Here it is.
Yeah, I have a question, but
go ahead.
Let's take a look at this first. It's okay.
No, go ahead. Ask the question.
No, I don't want to get off the subject. Go ahead.
Who's in charge here? I'll decide. Okay. You're in charge. I'm sorry. Okay, this original situation here is described in this portion right here. Here's the original complaint.
Uh-huh.
Federal National Mortgage Association as plaintiff versus John Doe and those occupants, 1 through 10 as defendants. So that's the original dispute on title.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, Federal National Mortgage is claiming the title to some house or a property. That's what's happening. That's the first claim that came in. And so the complaint came in to the Admiralty Court, as it were. And so the clerk of the court summons the owner of John Doe. Said, hey, we got a complaint against you over here. If you don't want to dispute it, just don't do anything. We'll get a judgment against you. But if you do want to dispute it, then there's certain procedures you would need to use to do that. And so we said, okay, well, if that's the case, then how about we do this? There are certain rules in the court. It's Rule 14 and Rule 11. If you go review those, in essence, what it basically says is after a case has started, if the original defendant, which would be John Doe, if the original defendant discovers that some other party is actually liable, then they can bring that party in as third party defendant. Okay? Mm-hmm. So how would you discover any such thing as that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm taking notes. I'm sorry.
Well, how about we go appoint the attorney for the original plaintiff as the fiduciary for the original defendant. Now who's liable? John Doe or the attorney we appoint?
Right, but you have to make the argument that that person is responsible.
Don't argue anything. That's the rule. That's their rule. You don't have to make any arguments. Okay, so we go appoint the attorney for the original plaintiff as the fiduciary for the original defendant. So now who is the liable party on this complaint?
So it's the attorney for the original plaintiff. Yeah.
Yeah. Now the rule says that either, once this third party defendant is brought to the court, the rule says that either the original plaintiff or the third party plaintiff can prosecute the third party defendant. Mm-hmm. Now, because this Bill Brown, who was formerly the attorney for the plaintiff, because they're now named on the court case, that would be a conflict of interest. So they can no longer represent the original plaintiff now, can they? So now if the original plaintiff wants to prosecute the third party defendant, they got to go get another attorney.
Yeah, but I mean, what if a judge just says, yeah, I'm not letting this in my courtroom?
Oh, no. Well, some of them try it. That's when you need to fire the judge. Typically I shouldn't say typically, but many times what happens when you make an appointment of fiduciary and put the paperwork into the court, the attorney that's named on that will go and try to put in a motion to strike.
Right.
And so that's when you go to court, you say, Your Honor, I stand on my pleading. The judge knows it. The judge knows this.
Well, you haven't done any court work in New Jersey, let me tell you.
Well, apparently you haven't either.
It's the racket state. Okay.
Did you appoint a fiduciary in your court case?
Nope.
Then you don't know it, do you? So don't be giving New Jersey a bad rap here until you've done it.
Well,
let me suggest that there are people in New Jersey who have done this and who have done it successfully. Don't paint the whole thing with one brush. anyway, not getting into personal things here, but look at here. All right, so now that you've done that,
Hmm.
then what's the responsibility of Bill Brown? To settle the claim against the title of John Doe. Now,
Okay.
the way we do that is we do an acceptance for value on the court case, and we put notice of that acceptance directly into the court. Now, Bill Brown has everything that's necessary for him
Hmm.
to go and settle that. I think we mentioned it here. Let's see. Get it smaller. Okay, so fiduciary responsibilities are to exercise scrupulous good faith and candor towards and for the benefit and on behalf of John Doe, the real man,
Yeah.
third party interest intervener, the exclusive and limited purpose of accepting and receiving all liabilities, accepting and receiving all service of process and other documents, instruments, blah, 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 and to discharge, settle, and close all matters material to above referenced defendant in all capital letter assemblages in the same shall be by order of real party interest, John Doe, third party interest intervener. Uh, okay, so fiduciary Bill Brown hereby authorized to use the private exemption of John Doe. And there again, those letters in red would be the social, what people call social security number. Actually, it's Treasury direct number. But anyway, so Bill Brown, the new fiduciary for settling this claim on title, is authorized to use the exemption to settle and close this for adjustment and set off in this instant matter, which is accepted for value in return for settlement. So we've done the acceptance for value on the court case, put that notice into the court with the exhibits and so forth. So now Bill Brown has everything that he needs to settle and close this case. And so fiduciary is to issue the appropriate IRS 1099 forms to be in compliance with all revenue requirements in this matter timely. And John Doe reserves the right to all records and activities of fiduciary debtor to maintain good faith. All right. This
Well,
is how we do it.
I get it, but it was, it's been a number of years since last time I was in court, so I didn't
Yeah,
know
yeah, I
at
know.
that time. But
This
it
is
was
new
very
to you.
interesting. Yeah, but it's very interesting to see how I was explaining the way I wanted my name change to appear. And I was explaining it was in the government styles manual. The judge is
Yeah,
like, "Well, what website did you find this from?" I'm like, "Well, it's right in the government styles manual."
yeah.
She really tried to, belittle me, and she didn't realize, people are.
Well, when they start that business, ask them for their name. See,
Yeah,
I actually, one time I was in the court, and the judge asked me for a name. We play that name game, It's fun to play the game. You can have a lot of fun with it.
yeah.
Well, the judge asked me what was my name, so I said, what's your name? And they pointed right straight to the little placard they have
Yeah.
up on their uh, desk, and his name was in all capital letters. That's a proof of it. So if they ask you a question again, they say, well, where'd you get that from? Is I got it right off your nameplate. Is that your name or your title? See what I mean?
Ooh,
You can play with them.
your name or your title. They'll
Yeah.
find you in contempt if they don't like you. Well, I'll tell you, but the problem is that there's a lot of um,
Corruption.
there's a lot of corruption, and the corruption is all about money,
Yep.
and they destroy homes, lives, families, and they have and without any regard whatsoever for your
Yeah.
your life and what it's doing to you. And the problem is they're so greedy that they've done it to so many people now that everybody's talking about it and sharing information, and that's
Yeah.
ultimately going to be their undoing. Now we also have which you heard this week that the legislators in West Virginia have impeached the entire Supreme Court because of
Yeah.
corruption and high crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's time. I mean, this is the
Yeah.
beginning, and it's time that that the courts stop stealing and and uh, and acquiring the assets through abuses of their power, through
Yeah.
color of law, through abuses of power. I
Yeah.
also wanted to make a point that something that came up, which was very interesting, which I'd certainly like for you to comment on. Also, another recent news story is how these individuals who are being arrested, let's just say people like the Clintons, who are going to be indicted soon, because it's my
Yeah.
understanding, simply because of the evidence of the emails that WikiLeaks has provided, that Seth Rich was killed for. Obtaining the contents of the DNC server, the crimes, as you saw, the IG report refers to crimes against children with Hillary Clinton. So really,
Oh
it's
yeah.
only now the issue is that one of the reasons they're setting up these military tribunals is because they're all sovereign citizens, which means they're not under the jurisdiction
Now
of
say that again.
their sovereign citizens.
Who is?
Many of these individuals who are, I guess you would say, they're on this sealed indictment list.
Let me suggest they are not sovereign citizens.
Okay.
They're U.S. citizens.
Okay. Well, they're sovereign with regard to the Admiralty Court. They don't have
No,
jurisdiction over
no, no. Don't use that word sovereign in that context. No, they're U.S. citizens and they are subject to the statutes and codes and so forth. And I think that's why Trump and Huber and all that bunch, put this stuff together. And I think they hired on something like 700,
well, at least I know about
400 attorneys.
470, almost 500 attorneys. Yeah.
Yeah. Now these are going to be defense attorneys
Mm.
in the military tribunals.
Right. The tribunals, as opposed to why wouldn't they? It has to do with their status, Winston, is what I was reading. Now, I can't verify that, but it had to do with their status and themselves being claimed as sovereign citizens, and that's why they're doing the military tribunals. So what's your comment? If you have another comment on that, you're muted. You're muted. You're muted. I can see you jabbering, but I can't hear you.
Okay. Yeah. They're not sovereign. No,
Okay.
they are lienable. It's obvious they're lienable because they're putting in indictments against them.
Okay.
So that's a lien. Again, remember what I showed there, about a claim is a lien on title?
Yes.
Yeah, so no, they're not sovereign, not at all. And so there are
Okay.
very few people who could even make the claim of sovereignty. That's why I put out that DVD, Reclaiming Your Status and Assets.
Right.
But in any event,
Yeah.
and others have put out other things that work too.
Well,
I
there's
mean,
a
I
lot
think Judge Anadon Ritz and
of.
some of these, there's several processes for doing this. I'm not the only one.
Right, but
But
there's people
but
who are
these
claiming to be sovereign,
they can claim
and
all
they're
they want
getting into
to,
big
but
trouble
it's not a word that applies to the situation.
now. Okay, I
It
mean,
is
well,
not. Now, because they're not sovereign,
yeah.
then they can be brought before a tribunal, a
Hmm.
military tribunal in this case, because again, here, what was it, 6 or 8 months ago, Clinton, as commander in chief, went and changed the Uniform Code of Military Justice so that they could try civilians for crimes in a military tribunal.
I mean, Trump did that.
Yeah, Trump.
Yeah,
As commander in chief,
yeah,
not as president, commander in chief.
right.
And so he went and changed the UCMJ, amended it in such a way that it makes it much simpler for the military to try a quote unquote civilian in the military court
Hmm. Hmm.
for crimes,
Right,
not just treason,
right. High
not
crime.
just treason, but they could try them for rape.
Yeah,
They could try them for murder. They could try them for all kinds of different things
right.
right in the military tribunal. So it's all set up.
Yeah. Okay,
It's all
so,
set up. It's
all
going.
right.
It's going, when it gets rolling, man. It's going to move fast.
Well, I certainly hope it gets rolling soon. We're waiting so long. But also, you heard about that compound in New Mexico where
Mm-hmm.
they had these jihadis out there who were teaching
Yeah.
children how to. Okay, so then we had the judge who they were arrested. They had the judge who initially released them on a signature bail, which means they didn't have to put up any money. But then the prosecutors found out that one of the women was here illegally for the past 20 years, and they got uh, customs involved. So immigration, she's being held. The other ones, what? This is crazy. Are you following it? Do you know what's going on?
Yeah, I've listened to some of it. I haven't really delved into it deeply. I
Mm,
just noticed that they had done that.
mm. So we just hope that there's some more common sense that prevails and real jurisprudence and to
Well, again, the interim government is military. The interim government is military.
well, we know that because of that meeting where President Trump had all of his military top brass with him, and
Of course.
he announced this was the calm before the storm.
Yeah, I mean, people, talk about him being president, and it's kind of a stitched together, quilt, all the things that have happened. But really, his real power that doesn't come from being president so much as being commander in chief, because the military are listening to him at this point. In times past, the military a lot of times has told the commander in chief to go take a flying leap,
Right, I'm sure.
but they're not now.
Yeah.
The military is totally behind, because they're the ones that contracted with Trump so he would do this.
Well,
I mean, the military
right.
didn't have to go along with the program that they're running with now at all. They didn't have to. I mean, 2015, when General Carter Ham became the interim president, he didn't have to deal with the civilian concepts of electing a president, making a commander in chief, and all that kind of thing. He didn't have to.
Right.
I mean, technically, we've been under military occupation since the Civil War, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Military don't have to listen to none of that stuff. They only do it for the sake of the public. And so all these things you see going on with, presidents and congresses and courts and all this kind of stuff, it's simply for public consumption. The
Right.
military doesn't have to do any of that, and they do have guns.
Yeah. All right. Well, that puts things into context for us. Thanks, Winston.
There
And
you go.
yeah, no, that's a big help. That's a big help. Thanks for your wisdom as always. You know,
Yeah, I'm just trying to give a little bit of history so that people could see how things have developed and to take a close look at what has happened because of evolution to see, do we want to continue that when we have the change? And hopefully the answer would be no.
right. Exactly. Exactly.
But you
Well,
can't make that choice if you don't know what it is. That's my point.
exactly. Well, thanks, Winston. And I'm telling you, without wisdom, folks, we are going to just make the same mistakes as in the past. And I think that's what we really want to prevent,
Yeah,
because
pretty much.
yeah, we don't want more of the same. Uh, we've had enough, I think. So, well, thank you again. We need wisdom, folks, because I mean, if you look at those people fighting in the Antifa today, there's not a shred of wisdom anywhere near them. And if they only really realized the damage they were doing to our country, maybe they would.
Yeah, people really need to go on the internet and look what happened right here in Portland, Oregon. When Antifa attacked the ICE offices and buildings and all that kind of, they actually pulled down the American flag and put up an Antifa flag. Why Fort Lewis didn't send soldiers in against them, I don't know. Because that is a direct coup. They
right.
pulled down the American flag and put up an Antifa flag. Why the military didn't? I mean, the mayor here in Portland, he wouldn't do anything. And the police, and there's riots and everything. It's not on the news. You can't watch it on the local news. Cause I watch the local news here sometimes. You have to go on the internet to find it. But go look
Yeah.
at Antifa, Portland ICE, on the internet, and you'll see it. It was a
Yeah.
direct attack, and nothing was done about it. And I think they're still down there doing the same stuff right now.
So then, what's the military waiting for? What are they doing?
I don't know.
Gee whiz! You think they got? Never mind.
Like I said, back
I
in
don't know, man. What's
1972,
the
when I was in the
plan?
Marine Corps, I was on the riot squad.
Mm,
And when all those riots happened in D.C. and it got out of control and the police couldn't handle it, we were called up. We were locked and loaded. The helicopters were on the pad,
mm.
and the blades were beaten. And before they finally called us off and told us to stand down. But for crying out loud, man, this is unbelievable.
Sure
What's
is.
happened right here in Portland?
Yeah, we really have to see that the military steps up and takes some action. And I know that they're trying, as CEO, of the corporation that is bankrupt. It's one of the Trump's functions, but what I'm disappointed is that Trump's not talking about it. And it just makes me wonder. I have to also make the comment that Deborah Tavares has been out talking about from stopthecrime.net. She's been out talking about how progressive this Agenda 2030 plan is. And it is moving along. These fires are not, you know,
Uh-uh.
these fires are not natural fires.
Nope.
Plus, I just want our viewers to be warned, if you've gotten to this length, this time of the program, which we hope you have, it's been 2 hours, but if you've gotten to this point and you're listening to this, realize that their next plan of attack now is on Q and on followers, and they're going to be
Yeah.
planting provocateurs, and they're going to be starting fires or things of that nature, and then blaming Q and non followers for it. And we know better. We know better,
Yep.
but just realize that this is what they're going to do, because they're really trying. They're losing. They're like backed in a corner. This is a rabid animal backed in a corner, and they're just going ballistic. This is their last, they just don't realize that, the time has changed. We're in the age of Aquarius. The dark age is over, and it's time to change. Now we can do it peacefully, or they're going to try to bring down the world with them if they can't have it. And that's, apparently they're going to take the scorched earth approach, which is what they're doing, literally scorching the earth.
Yeah.
So, folks, just I'm not sure why they're not we're not seeing, National Guard uh, troops come out when those riots come out. I don't know what's going on there.
This thing in Portland went on from the middle of June all the way through July. As far as I know, they're still down there.
Mm,
And taking down the American flag,
yeah.
that's a direct attack.
Yep. Well, that Trojan horse of political correctness came in, and it spread its
Yeah, after all, it is Portland.
well, Portland, exactly. It came in, and then it has convinced the feeble-minded to accept whatever society's pushing on them, like political correctness run amok, taking statues down. They just erected a statue. Where was it, Winston? It was on the news, of Baal or Satan or whatever it was. It's
Yeah.
like, folks, boy, it's right in front of you. Really? It's right in front of
Mm-hmm.
you. And if you think it's not your business, when will it be? When
Mm-hmm.
you're walked into a concentration camp, is that when it's going to be your business? Too late then, folks. If you're not willing to defend your country now, you don't deserve being here. That's the bottom line, because it's about we the people. We have to be the gatekeepers. We have to be the watchdogs of what's going on in the government. And if you're going to sit by and take a passive approach, you're going to lose it. We're all going to lose it. That's all I have to say. So anyway, Winston, thank you so much. Thank you for your wisdom, because we need that. We need the wisdom to guide us so that we don't repeat these mistakes and these even though they're
Yeah.
well intended initially, they were bastardized, as you said, Winston. So thank you so much. Stay safe over there.
Yeah. I'm not. I don't go downtown.
Okay. I just want to remind our viewers too that you can only reach us on our to know that it's an official Goldfish Report website. Please, our link. Please go to our website, www.thegoldfishreport.com. It's that simple. Go to our page, which you're looking at right now, and you'll see the links to all of our channels. You can view us. You have to have a separate link for the POTUS reports on YouTube, but not on BitChute. So if you only want to go to YouTube, this is how you go to view our POTUS reports. But just click on the regular BitChute or YouTube channel here, and you will get access to our videos wherever you'd like. We have a blog. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. Our Facebook news page is pretty busy. It's very, very active. We get about 100,000 views a week, viewers weekly, and might be even more than that. They've been shadow banning us, and it has been pretty serious. We're also on Twitter. Here's our Twitter feed, which is updated all the time. It's live, and we're going to have some more interesting interviews coming up, because we really need to, as crazy as it's going to get, it's because there's something much, much better coming. And these are really the birthing pains of bringing on a new era for humanity on this planet. Right, Winston?
Yeah, that's it. And again, not to, let's leave everybody with a good, nice feeling on a parting shot. Like I say, we talk about some pretty horrendous things sometimes, but people just need to be calm. Praying for what's right, and living good lives, good moral, ethical lives. And I think we're going to get the job done. Okay, it's going to take a lot of elbow grease, like they say,
Yeah.
get some of these things worked out. And I appreciate all those who are working for the just cause. And so we should leave everybody with a good feeling. I don't want to get people too stirred up too much.
Right. Even though it looks, out of the chaos that seems to be happening, there will emerge an order of a higher order, actually. And so we are working towards that. I just hope we don't have too much, of the problems. But I think what they're doing is they're showing, just like with why Clinton hasn't been arrested and all this yet. It just has to play out, because you can't go in. First of all, you can't have Trump explain 9/11 before you expose how corrupt the FBI and DOJ were. So until
Yep.
you expose that first, you're not even going to believe that they could also be involved in 9/11. So it's a psychological process for our benefit, folks. That's what it is, really. So whether you agree with it or not, it's another story, but that's, I think, the whole intention. So, Winston, I hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah, they look shaping up pretty good for weather and whatnot, so we'll probably do pretty good.
That's good. That's good. I'm looking forward to the fall, because this winter has been, I mean, the summer rather has been unbearable, with very, very high humidity on the East Coast and high
Now, like I say, the outside temperature here, right where I'm at right now, is 53 degrees.
Oh, that sounds good to me. I keep it 66.
Not me.
No, I keep
Not
it
me.
66 in my house all year round.
Oh, brother.
Yeah, it's comfortable. Okay, so, well, I would take 56. That's okay. I mean, it's so hot, you can't even enjoy being outside,
I
because you
know.
can't even breathe. The dew points like in the 70s. Like, who can breathe in that? So, everybody, I hope you all have a great weekend. We'll be back on Monday with another POTUS report, some other great interviews coming up. I'm so excited. I really hope we get to interview this lovely woman. But there may be some, uh, she's multilingual, and it's, uh, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to have someone on who's not used to being in a public forum, in an English-speaking forum, because the accent is sometimes very difficult to understand. So I don't want to, put
Well, you can
anybody.
understand me, can't you?
Yeah, I'm used to you though, Winston. And I'm still waiting to get into the, ascended masters, but he
Well, I
says,
don't know,
nah,
man. You're not working hard enough, I don't think, to
he says
get
I'm not ready.
qualified.
Well,
You
we're
got to get
waiting.
bona fide.
Yeah, we're waiting for your ham bone. So
You ain't going to get it until certain things happen.
yeah, we need to get those viewers up. Hopefully, we'll make that. Winston promised our viewers that when we reached 10,000, or actually it was 12,000, when we when we were when we were deleted off of YouTube, if we can regain our viewers, he'd do ham bone for everybody. So let's make that happen. Come on, we want to see Winston's ham bone. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, to our BitChute channel. And we hope everyone has a nice weekend. Thanks for joining us. And this concludes this edition of the GoldFish Report.